trail from a cross country.
Say that again. I just got the recording in progress.
Yeah. So what's the difference? What's the demarcations that makes a trail race different from a cross country race?
You'd probably have to ask the hardcore trail racers. I think trail racing, cross country is sort of a hybrid of, I won't say road, I guess it's a very rough way to put it would be a hybrid between road racing and trail racing. It tends to be, it can involve trails. It's shorter than trail racing. Trail races tend to be longer, with the exception of, say, Wachusett Mountain that you did, which is 3 miles.
But that's a mountain race, not a trail
It's a
race.
mountain race. Okay, not a trail race. Yeah, trail be longer. And they all tend to be on what in recent years has been called technical running. I always thought of that as being just rough trail. The word technical never entered my mind. Yeah, cross-country racing usually has a little bit more, at least partially open, off-road running, grass. It's a mixture. It's not all rough trail. Trail racing tends to pride itself on being rough trails. So
yeah, and the one trail
I'm
race.
not an active trail racer.
Yeah, the one trail race that I had, there's a single track often.
Yeah.
So you're going on these, there's no place to pass, and you're going up and down these hills on this single track, kind of like a goat track. So it's different than the cross country where you have sort of a wider area you can cross and pass people.
What's the start of the race like if it's so narrow like that? Is it wide in the beginning and then you just have to go single file at some point? Or how
Yeah,
does
the one that I was in, you had a wider area, but it narrowed down quick.
so you could get all boxed in, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
In Europe, they have this thing called fell racing, which is essentially a form of mountain racing. And when I lived in Ireland, there was one actually in the town that I lived in, and it was up this trail that was largely kind of sheep trail path that had been beaten down by sheep, and people, it was so steep that people were so steep and thick that people were walking in parts of it. I was running in, I don't know, I was in 6th or 7th place, and I realized I'm going to have to walk. This is awful. I'm just a loser here. And I looked up ahead, everybody up ahead of me is walking. And in Scotland, they do even weirder things. They do these things that are combined fell races and open sea kayaking. So yeah, every culture has its spin on this sort of stuff. Yeah.
Remember once they had the Masters National back in like 99 till I think 2002, they had the Masters National 5K cross country at Homedale Park. And I remember there's a very steep hill and I saw people walking and I was a little surprised to see that, but yeah, it was just so steep.
It happens.
Couldn't.
Okay, so we have officially started, and I always wonder when I should start the recording because I don't want to include the very beginning when we're all just sort of chit-chatting. But on the other hand, Jan was asking this really great question, so I thought, well, we've got to get this on here. So we've already had our first question, and this is wonderful. So this is our second Ask the Coach session, and our dear coach, John Barber, is right here. And we have a whole bunch of questions on the form. We also have a whole bunch of questions in our head. So basically, I'll just open it up to another question. And I am recording it so that other people who can't be here can watch it.
And Anne, may I just say very briefly that even though this is sort of Ask the Coach, I'm the first one to admit that I don't have all the answers. I have answers that I don't have. So I look at this as being sort of an educated conversation, and that hopefully out of all of that, some greater knowledge will emerge from our collective participation.
Yeah, very much. People can join in. If you were at our last one, you remember that it really did become a conversation, which was really, really interesting and fascinating.
Well, can I kick it off with, I wrote in one of the, actually more than one of the questions in the little form. And after having just done this Adrian Martinez mile with Jan this last weekend, I ended up not passing another 60s runner by like a third of a second. And actually looking at the splits and everything, she'd been way ahead of me for most of the race, and I actually made up a lot of ground on her, and yet I failed to actually pass her at the very end. So I'm curious about, I don't think of myself as being someone who has like a really fantastic kick. I don't think I'm terrible in that department, but I wish I really just had that just competitive, just total, like nail it at the last minute. So how do you, what would you say to help those of us in that situation to really nail our kick? What can we do to get better at kicking at the end?
My first response to that, Vicky, is that a lot of that just comes from regular track racing and being accustomed to, you know, what track tactics are like and how track differs from roads and cross country. So I think that's the first thing. Second thing is, yes, there are certain specific things. And a year ago, when you and Christine were training together specifically to run a mile, a lot of that kind of training is an asset to, you know, to be your miling in general and to being strong at the finish. And again, Alda's the professional middle distance runner here, so she has a lot to offer. And this is one of those areas where I say this, that I'm not necessarily the authoritative answer, but I love the mile. And if I'd been born with more fast twitch fibers, I would have run it a lot more often. And I've run it every chance I've had an opportunity to. In preparation for something like that, it's training, running really fast when your legs are really tired. So like last night when we did those 3 200s at the end of the workout, that wasn't mile specific, but it's an example of you get your legs really tired through a workout and then you run them hard, then you run them fast. And, you know, you have to adjust for that according to age. You know, you wouldn't do it as intensely or as many of them as you might when we were 30 years younger. Basically, yeah, training your legs to run fast when they're tired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You want to kick in on that?
Oh,
Yeah, I'll take my, well, I think that, yeah, you have to train the ATP, basically. There's the mitochondria to get that. You have to really run hard when you're tired. And you're saying you're doing repetition work to get your VO2 max down. So you're doing a hard interval, like a repeat 800, let's say, with a short recovery time. And then when you're totally fatigued after doing like 4 or 5 of those, you rest completely. And then you do maybe 3 or 4, not a lot, but the ones that you do at the end, you give it everything for the 200. You do like repeat 200s. And that's how you get your kick, is when you're tired and you have to lift your knees and you have to like use your arms. So that's part of it. And you have to taper before going into like a major event. So you don't get that fatigue. And 2 days before you're kind of, maybe you do a couple of striders, which are like 20 seconds, really quick intervals to really get that heart rate up beforehand. But it's mostly, yeah, when you're fatigued but with a good recovery and a good rest, because you really want to push it at the end for like a 200, a 100, a 200.
Yeah, I'll just add one little other point on that, and that is to reinforce what Alda said, is that when you were doing that kind of specific training, you do increased recovery. Now, the workouts that we do actually have quite a lot of recovery in them, simply because we have such a wide variety of paces. But if you were doing a very specific, you know, a workout tailored very specifically to an individual, yes, you would have high recovery, high intensity. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's helpful, actually. Yeah, no, appreciate that.
so one of the things I wanted to contribute is that, because John asked me about the, you know, the marathon 1 mile relay and my time compared to Adrian Martinez. And as I evaluated my own preparation, as Alda noted, it was very hot 2 days before the marathon relay, and yet I had done Thursday mornings, I go to the track, and I had done the same interval workout that I always do and didn't really realize until afterwards how hot it was, how tired it was. And so before Adrian Martinez, I did half of that workout. And of course, the weather was better, but also I don't run in the evening. So there's all these things to consider. But as I think Kathy Uschneider had done some research into masters runners and some research into taking 2 days prior to an event rather than just one day, which is sort of the, standard that we think about. So, so yeah, listening to your body and changing as we get older.
Mhm.
Track is fun.
No, track really does use a different energy level. You could take a day off before like a 5K or a 10K because you're in the aerobic. But when you have to compete in the anaerobic stage, it takes a lot more energy and you really need to be recovered before you go, because you want to really push in that anaerobic state. And you have to really work ahead of time to get your body used to it. So having done that mile probably helped you doing the second mile. The first one of the season always feels like crap when you get out on the track. And it's like, oh my God, I feel like I've never been on the track before.
Yeah.
And I feel horrible. And then the second one feels better because you work that anaerobic system. You've been doing that. So having done that mile in the mile relay helped you a lot in doing Adrian Martinez.
And even though you weren't there, Vicky was. And so she was my inspiration. Yay,
And
another
having
living
somebody
person.
to gear off of, when you're running by
Yeah.
yourself, it's really difficult, but having somebody to kind of gear off of and to kind of focus on really makes a difference in
Yeah.
a track race. And
Well,
it becomes
and
strategy in a lot of ways. And it's very helpful.
it was actually really fun to be there with Jan, because that's how I learned about Liberty, was meeting Jan at that exact same race 11 years ago. And in fact, I ran the same time 11 years ago that I ran just the other day. So I did like about a 6:40 then.
Oh.
And I remember Jan asking me like back then, oh, how fast do you think you're going to run? I was like, maybe a 6:40. And Jan ran it at age 69 at 6:25. She did a 6:25.
Amazing.
And I remember I was like, I want to join the club that she's part of.
It's so amazing.
So no.
One of the interesting things about this discussion is that there's a whole psychological element too. It's not just the physical element. And Jan mentioned the CSU guy that she was deciding whether or not to pass, and Vicky mentioned being close to this woman that she wanted to pass. And so I am not experienced in these things, but I would love to hear more about this psychological element. How do you decide, okay, I'm going to pass this person, and what helps you to make that decision psychologically? I mean, assuming you have the legs to do it, right?
That's
Get
what makes
yourself to the
track so
point.
much fun. Is
Yeah.
that when I'm in a road race, I feel like it's a time trial. I'm running, but who the hell knows who's around you or your age or who you're going after. And as you get older, you're just part of the crowd in the back. But when you're on a track, especially like at the nationals, and you have, the people in front of you and the time, who you're going after.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I always study like who's the competition and where are we, and you go out, and it makes it that much. There is that element of how to approach it. What's the best tactic? Is it a strategy race? Is everybody going out slow and like trying to see what everybody else is doing? Or are you going to have somebody that's a rabbit going out, and then you don't want to get pulled through? So it makes it much more interesting. After a while, after you've been to a lot of these races, you get to know everybody, and
Right.
know what their style is, and it
That-
makes it
yeah.
a lot of fun.
That totally does. It is a lot about that. And even with the road races, when, I used to do the pub series, and I would see the same people there, and you find your people who you're around and kind of vying with. And, Mary McNulty from HFC, was always, I could always beat her. And then suddenly she beat me one day. I was like, what? And then from then on, I was like, oh no, she's not going to beat me, you know? And so I'd be like vying with her to make sure she couldn't beat me. And I realized with this Adrian Martinez race, I had entered it at the last minute, this last one, just the last weekend. And I hadn't paid attention to who else was in there because it was such a last minute decision. And I didn't realize there was this woman in her 60s. So I didn't even know that there was this woman that I should have been like trying to kick out at the end, you know? And so it would have been good to know that
Yeah.
in advance. And I hadn't paid enough attention.
The thing about track racing is there are fewer people in it. So it's sort of easier to sort of spot people in that way. And I will certainly grant Alda as a track specialist in throughout her history. I'm someone who was not, as I said, didn't have enough fast twitch fibers to be really good at track as much as I would have liked to, as much as I enjoy the track. So road and cross country were the things that I participated in them, you know, more fully. And the same thing actually does happen on, you know, in a road race. There can be a lot of people all over the place, but you get to know who the people are that you need to be near. And in cross country in particular, or road as well, when you get into a national masters championship, you have the 5-year age group on the back. So you're very, very keyed in to who your competition is, whether you know them or not, and very often you do. This gentleman from Central Washington near Yakima, Rick Becker, he and I we're not rivals, we're friends, but we have sort of fallen into a rivalry over the last 15 or 20 years. When we get to national championships, he's either having a good day or I'm having a good day. We've had some great battles together. We always know where each other is. He reminded me after this last cross-country nationals in San Francisco that he's beaten me 4 times and I've beaten him 4 times in that. I had no idea,
Track.
you know. But when Rick Becker's in the race, I always know where he is. And you know,
Right.
It's fun that way. Yeah.
It is fun that way.
So one of the things, because I didn't know these people in our section that Vicki and I did, is I just asked some people, like, what do you hope to accomplish, so that I didn't go out too fast, because I knew at my age I was probably going to be the slowest. As it turns out, the CSU guy, who was only 62, was 11 seconds behind me. Small feats, but yeah, knowing kind of, even though when you enter, you put what you think you might do, and that's how they line you up. But when I was talking to Kevin Delaney, because he was in the inside lane before the race, he's like, that guy can beat me, that guy can beat me. And so he kind of knew that they must have given a different time, because he was absolutely right in his predictions of how the results came out. So yeah, it's just, it is strategy. But I think that Anne mentioned, I don't know if any of you have read the book Endure.
No.
Anybody? No?
Brenda
Sure.
Oh, you have? Okay.
And I've read it. I think
Okay.
it was excellent.
Huh.
Yep.
Yes,
What is it called again?
Endure.
By who?
Alex Hutchinson,
Yeah.
Okay.
PhD. And I'm only in
Sure.
the 4th chapter or whatever, but.
Okay.
What a shock. Mary Kate has it.
Yeah,
Endure. Okay.
there you go.
There it
Yeah.
is, here it is, Endure.
So
Okay.
So he is talking about, I find it really interesting because a bazillion years ago, one of my brothers gave me Tim Noakes' book, the original one. And actually, John, remember I gave you the 3rd edition that I got for like nearly nothing. But it is talking about past research and current research about VO2 max and limits, and then, you know, the brain and how that plays such a significant part. And I've always proposed that anyway. Everything being equal, the person who wants it the most is gonna
Right.
get it.
Right. I do think there's just that intangible, like, who wants it the most. Yeah.
And if you'd
That's for
known,
sure.
you would have had it.
Right. I didn't know that woman. I thought she was younger. I didn't know she was in her 60s. If I had known she was in her 60s, I know I would have come up with something more. I know I would have. Yes.
Vicky, that has happened to all of us at stage of our lives or another. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
just that seconds count.
I
David
know.
Sanchin has
Right.
always said that, seconds count.
Yeah.
And the
And
problem with the
split
chip
seconds.
timing and road racing, it's a different topic now, switching to road racing, but the chip timing means that you may not be within
Yeah.
sight of people you're actually competing with.
Right.
And you end up at the end and you are 1 second slower than somebody in your age group but you never saw that person because they're just
Yeah.
far enough ahead, having started in a different,
Mhm.
Although,
bunch of
although
folks, so
now-
it's really.
although nowadays, most of the age group categories are by chip time. So you may not see them, but the equity is there and that
Yeah.
it's going to be the fastest person who crosses the finish line.
Yes.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's I definitely am in favor of chip time, but it's just that you can't, then it's not a race with you. There's that psychological element of
Yeah.
race with people who are near your time is
Yeah.
or can be missing. It may be there. You may be next to somebody, but
Well, John and I get a lot of credit for this because we were on the USATF New England board to get masters results based on chip time so that us older people didn't feel compelled to be on the starting line with elite, fast, young people. And so yay that, we have that net time.
Yeah.
It's thundering and lightning here.
Oh, yeah, I just. heard.
Yeah, here too.
Although in the marathon, we have the top masters, it's by gun time because they're in the pro start because this is
Yes. Yes.
it's the only way we can, and I took that a couple of years ago because it's the only way we can properly vet
Yes.
or that drug testing is taking place and that we know what their historical progression is. So it was the only way
Yeah.
because it's such an international masters group.
Yes.
Now to kind of hand vet it.
But they do get to start at the front. I mean, so that's what we were trying to prevent is people like Harry Carter, getting trampled because he had to be at that starting line. I know. And then the young elite athletes would get annoyed at older athletes being in their way.
Yeah.
In James Joyce, they have the masters start, like, I think it was 4 minutes ahead or something. I
Yeah,
think that
separate,
was a good idea.
Yeah.
I did that for Falmouth and I guess the masters did not like that. And so I only did Falmouth 1 year. And so now it's back to masters being in the mass start and
In mix. Okay. Interesting.
it's tough because when you get a race that's so crowded, the net time goes out the window, right? Because you can't weave your way through that crowd, not a Falmouth.
Yeah. Right.
You say they didn't want to have the masters start first. Why did they dislike that?
No, they didn't want the top masters. So now most races, the pros start and then there's a little bit of a gap. So it kind of came about because of 2018 Boston, where you had the women go first, followed by the men, followed by the mass participants. Some of the mass participants broke into those top 10 positions. But what most of the world didn't recognize, or the media, is that there were two different races, right? When you have an all women's race, you know who your competitors are to all of the points you guys have been talking about. You know who your competitors are because you can look around and see who you're competing against, and that's really important. When you're with the mass participants and you're a woman who's broken into the top 10, you have had men surround you during an incredibly windy and cold and harsh race. You've had maybe your best friend who's pacing you, a spouse, a coach, whoever. So it's a very much an unfair advantage. But because of that, then we just said, you can only rank in this group, or age group in the mass participant.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Boston is, in a sense, the Boston Marathon is I almost want to say an entity into itself, but it's really kind of a pace setter. Whatever Boston adjusts to, everybody else is going to figure out that they need to adjust to.
Yeah, also, hopefully, because, I'm really involved with the para groups now, all the different divisions, upper impairment, lower impairment, visual impairment. And I hope that spreads to all the races Liberty is running in, because you don't see many para athletes outside of those big races, because there's just not the accommodation, accessibility,
Right.
acceptance for them. So age groupers and us, all of us old folks here, that's one thing, but
My local race that starts right outside my window here and finishes the Corab 5K a couple Sundays ago has the opposite problem. They have all these young kids that they let start on the front line who sprint for 200 yards and then die. And everybody else is trying to claw them out of the way without causing a dangerous collision. Over.
I do the Great Bear Run, it's a little fun run, but what they do is they have all the, they'll say, the guy will say, okay, 13 and over on the line now, and then.
Yeah.
13 plus start, and then maybe give, some time interval, and then have the kids start. So you're not trampling the kids that way.
Yeah. Anne, are there any of the other written questions? Because I don't have it right on my screen.
No, I have it right here, but Margaret has raised her hand, so Margaret.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Okay, I'll be brief because I know this question may be best, John, if we're on the track, but it has to do with form. And so I thought this may be just a nice topic because it's not like I'm new to running, but I kind of feel very new to running in comparison to all of you who are like
so do I.
runners and you like good runners. And I'm just lately, last, I think 6 months, to be honest with you, is like trying to kind of tweak my form. So I had a lot of injuries last summer, and I'm just like, there've been little things. And so I've just been reading a lot. And John, I guess my question to you, sorry to give you all the context, but is really like, if there are 3 things that I'm speaking from a beginner standpoint, like in terms of form, because I know every form is kind of unique and there's no such thing as perfect form, but like I've read really like kind of trends, like there are 3 things where it's like chest needs to be like you're leaning forward, but you don't want to open up your chest because then you'll be leaning backwards, and the foot strike. And I've been reading a lot about dorsiflexion or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm going way into like like this cavernous hole. And so I'm like, maybe just pull me back and be like, these are the 3 things you really want to focus on. And also last thing, I think this is unique to me, or just me. Like my knees cave in. So like my physical therapist is always like, pretend to really emphasize those knees going out. I don't know. So I'm just asking, since you guys are the pros in my mind.
Well, I'll kick it off and then others can add, because I'm sure that others will have alternative or differing perspectives from me. In the years that I have functioned as a coach, I have tried less and less to tinker with people's form. Because I think that can, if you say do this and not do that, in the long term, it can do more harm than good. Some of the greatest runners in the world have had the worst form and vice versa. So that's one thing. At the same time, yeah, there are principles, as you cite, that are valuable. I think that it is for long distance runners, people who are running road races, 5K and longer in particular, it is valuable to actually think about running more upright. Because this is sort of myth that a slight lean, and I suppose, Alda is much more in tune with the physics of it than I am. But I think if overall for a runner, being slightly upright opens your chest up, opens your lungs up, and avoids what over fatigue in a road race can be called the old French fry lean, the wilted French fry, sorry, like that, which is what you want to avoid. And in terms of dorsiflexion, yes, using your ankle and foot as a power lever, it's absolutely valuable. I think it comes most into play in shorter distances, particularly track racing, but at the same time, there is actually no harm at all in training for that. When I was coaching at Greater Lowell, I coached for the Greater Lowell Club for, I guess about 10 years. And one of the things I always recommended that people do at the end of workouts there, which would work more there than it would on the Harvard field for a lot of reasons, was strides up and down the field barefoot. And if you find a good place on grass where you can run barefoot, I would absolutely recommend finishing a workout a couple times a week, doing accelerations and decelerations on grass that way, because that definitely strengthens the ankle, improves the power drive off of that, that dorsiflexion or whatever you want to call it. That's the scientific term, but just that drive from using the ankle lever. Yeah. And it's valuable. It's especially valuable in sprints and middle distances, but it's valuable for all runners as well, I believe.
Thanks, John.
Anybody else want to kick in on that?
Yeah, I think someone described it as pretend you're a puppet and you have a string running through the center of your body, holding that string up, and you're running from your hips up very straight.
Yeah. I sometimes, when I'm running, I'm conscious I don't want to keep my chin up. I don't want to let my chin sag too much. Keep the chin up, and that helps keep that string going. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And just feel loose, like people who run kind of tight. You don't want to run tight. You want to have kind of the upper body. Use your arms. And when they talk about being upright, it doesn't mean that you want your vector basically going straight. It's that forward lean, but not, it doesn't have to be emphasized that much. It's just, you don't want all your force going upright, because you want to go in that direction. You want to go horizontal. You don't want to go vertical. So if you're a heel striker and you're going up and down, you really just want to think about just going a little forward, maybe instead of heel striking, kind of midfoot, and relaxed.
Yes, that's another factor is how your natural foot strike is, whether you're a midfoot or forefoot striker versus a heel striker. Yes, you can waste a lot of energy if you're a heel striker going up.
Yeah.
I think the whole purpose of the starting block was to push backwards. So that's sprinting, but pushing backward to go more horizontal.
Yeah.
But that's more like if you're doing like 100-yard dash or something.
What's next?
Well, can I ask about age grading?
Yes.
What do you like? How can, and Jan and I were talking about this the other day, and there are these crazy new age grading standards that have come out that no one seems to be using because they're so crazy. Or so maybe you have something to say about that. But like, how can one appropriately use age grading? I mean, to me, when I first heard about it, I thought, great. I'm not running as fast as I, on an absolute basis as when I was younger, but I could like aim at trying to keep the same age grade or better. But like, what advice would you give about how to use the age grading system?
Oh my, age grading falls, as far as I can tell, it falls into that liminal area between art and science. It purports to be science, but it's imperfect, so it's art. So I think, we take age grading, we take it seriously, but with a grain of salt. It's never going to be, I don't think it, maybe someday it will be perfected, but I just don't think in my lifetime, it's going to be perfected in a way that we actually, is locked into, the world record of people under the age of 25. It's an approximation, and it's better than nothing, but it's imperfect. And I don't take it terribly seriously. I use it as a guide, but I don't say, I'm 86% this year, I'm 83% last year, I'm worse than I was. I guess I just don't worry about it as much as
You're a better man than me.
I don't know. But,
I always want to get over 80%.
I was going to say to you, Vicki, I can totally get if somebody is working on 80% or any level, but I think 80% is a really key level. If you're working on that, you really want it to be able to believe in that.
Yeah.
So Vicky, just question for you. You said, is there something new and different about the age grading this year than it has been in the past?
Well, they keep coming out with different standards. I noticed when I joined, like every 5 years, they would come out with something new, and that seemed to sort of make some sense. But they came out with, and there are different ones out there. It's really hard to tell, like, what is there one official? I'm not clear that there is, but there was something that came out this last year that suddenly plunged all of us, especially, well, for me, I'm always hovering right around 80%, and suddenly this would have plunged me back down to like 76, 77%, like overnight. And I was
That's
like, well,
because
where
of
did that
people
come
like
from?
Jan, Vicky, who run so fast at her age. I mean,
Maybe
it's pretty
it's
obvious.
Jan's fault. I don't know.
They base it on actual results. And
That's what I
so,
thought. And
so
yet,
Jan, it's actually your fault.
maybe. And
No,
yet
no,
it seems so dramatic.
No, you
Faith
can read
Kipyegon
about-
is not helping either.
You can read about sort of the philosophy of the new age rating, which Stephen Pekakonis alerted me to. And it's more not from our current runners, but it's more from a longitudinal over time elite athletes who were high school runners and looking at how they change over time. Which is why I think the USATF doesn't use those tables, because the philosophy is different than what we've been using. So if you go to USATF, any of the tables they use are the most current ones prior to this announcement that they have.
Right.
I think that's a valuable thing. When in doubt, go to USATF and stick with them, whatever any other tables may say. Yeah.
This is an interesting conversation. Do you think it's beneficial or not beneficial to have this in your brain? And I'm looking at you, Vicky, because I'm getting to the point you're uber competitive. But is it beneficial to measure yourself against what you would have run at an age when you may or may not have been running? Or against who your competitors are currently, or against yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I just don't even know what all these things are. I guess I had, when I first joined Liberty, I got faster and faster. And then I hit a point where I started getting slower, and age grading seemed like a way of keeping track of, how am I still doing as I'm getting older? And I did have this benchmark of like, oh, if I can get over 80%, that seemed to be sort of a good thing to shoot for.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not. That's why I realize it's okay. It turns out to be a lot more complicated than I thought it was. And so ultimately, you're right. I don't want to just measure myself against some silly standard if it does have an element of silly to it. Like so I'm just trying to figure out as I get older, like what is this? I can't measure myself against my absolute times anymore. So how do I measure myself?
Yeah.
So
I always go for my season's best, best for the year, or can I beat what I did, let's say last year, 2-3 years ago? Like, I won't get my college time back, but if I can say, wow, this is my best time in the past few years, then that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
I love age grading.
Yeah, I do.
I'm 79, so I love age grading. Because
Yeah.
you can do
I think the older we get, the more we love age grading.
Yes.
But Jen can get over 100%, so she's in a special category of her own.
One thing I've noticed lately is that if I look back to when like I was in my 30s and Mary Harada was like the age I am now, she'd be like the 60-year-old on the track. And now I look around and there are so many more women in the 60s, and it's amazing how fast they are, like Mary
Yes.
Kemp's, it's like, wow, it's like they'd be competitive in a much younger age group. So I think it's like, kind of like when you're in a class, like the curve, you know what I mean? Like the
Mhm.
bar is being raised because the people our age, they're so more numerous and they're faster. Just an observation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe
think
that's a factor,
Probably good for
Title IX played a
good for
huge
goal
part in
setting.
all that, because those of us my age and even younger just didn't have the opportunities. And so that's, I think, another reason why age grading, and plus the fact that you can go back, and John knows I'm kind of obsessed about it. So I can go back and look at Kathy Martin breaking my 5K record by a second or something and see if her age grading was actually better than mine. And so it's for those of you who love statistics, age grading is a lot of fun.
Mhm.
You know, just talking about Kathy Martin, I was just thinking about, there was a race quite a few years ago, and I think she did a 5K on the track, and that, the age grading, it's a percent, but it's also, okay, what would, what's the equivalent in an open runner?
Right.
What would your time be if you were 20? And
Right.
her time, it was so fast, and I looked it up, and I'm really into like looking things up. So I think it was like the world record for any human, and I thought, well,
Yeah.
I'm a little skeptical. I know she's really good,
Mm.
but is she really like the best 5K ever, relative, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
if you took her age at 50, time at 50, factored into 20-year-old, would she really be better than any man that ever 20, ran the, something like that. So I thought, I'm a little skeptical. Is it really correct,
For
Well,
those that
John
may
said
not
a grain
know,
of salt. I would say more like a half a shaker of salt.
Mm.
for those that may not know, Kathy or Catherine Martin is a runner in New York who has been like the greatest age grade runner in the country, or one of the greatest. I don't want to eliminate Jan here. Jan's right up there. But she's been just top of a heap age grade runner for many, many years. And she's
yeah.
now, isn't she, Jan?
I think she's in her 70s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's 71, but I'm waiting to see what she's going to be like at 79.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Mm.
Does anyone know?
We last
Diana,
year,
is it-
our 10K is coming up next week on the 25th. And we set up last year, there's a big thing. We set it up so that we would have extra officials. We had a timing map, and she was intent on setting the world 8K world record. So we had race officials there. I mean, it was a whole thing, the whole thing, rolled out the carpet, but she did not achieve the 8K. So Jan, if you want to come on the 25th, we will have an 8K map for you. And Steve Vitonis is our head official, and we'll make sure that we know that you are there. I'm just saying, I am not trying to recruit you, but if you'd like to attend, let me know.
That's great. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay, Jan, you got that in your date book. Good.
Mhm.
And by the way, hello to Kelly and Jazz who are down there.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, hi.
Hi,
So-
wow. It's so nice to hear you guys talk and you have all this experience and I'm just like taking it all in, but I'm like multitasking here, so
Sure.
forgive me if I'm.
We understand.
Hey,
love-
we're
I
glad
love
you're
how
here.
competitive everyone is.
That helps.
I
Good
didn't
thing.
think about that. I was just,
No, I love stats too, so this is great information. Thank you.
So we have a bunch of questions, really interesting questions on the sheet, but I want to give people here an opportunity to ask a question too, if you have something else, or I can pick one. I mean, I might want to pick one that I did not submit, but that I could have submitted, which is if one is trying to do a speed workout and a long run each week and maybe has time for a third quality workout, would you prioritize a tempo workout, hills, something else?
Oh, this is a good question. Go ahead, John.
It is. And again, the answer to that somewhat varies with age. You know, most of the folks that we have here now are at various age groups. So the older you get, the more you would back off. However, I think in terms of if you have long run, speed workout, track workout, I would, if you're going to do a third thing, I would balance that with a tempo run as opposed to say hills. Hills, a hill workout probably more closely corresponds to a track workout, although there are distinct differences. But if one is running 6 or 7 days a week, and at a certain age, most people are probably not running 6 or 7 days a week. I'm 69 years old. I try to run 6 days a week. I definitely try to take a day off. Occasionally I will run 7 days by accident, but I'm kind of look at myself as being a 5 or 6 day runner. And 20 years ago, I was a 7 day runner. So you have to put, find where you are on that spectrum. But your long run day, again, that varies according to what you're training for. My long run day now is not as long as it was 10 or 15 years ago. So let's say you have a long run day, whatever is appropriate to your age. You have a track workout, say if you're Tuesday night at Harvard with the Liberty Group. If you're going to do a third workout, I would suggest that probably be a tempo run, anywhere from between 3 and 4 miles, or shall we say 20 to 30 minutes, because that is at an effort level that is in between. It's not as high as speed. It's manageable, but it is also, assuming you know what tempo run level is, which not everyone does. I've realized over time. But yes, that's what I would suggest, and I'm certainly open to suggestions from the peanut gallery here.
So what is a tempo run, John? Or maybe we already talked about this in the last one, but just
we've talked about this in the past.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Tempo run generally is the rule of thumb is that it's the level at which you are taking in as much oxygen as you are using. So it's your lactate threshold. The layperson's definition for it is the level at which you cannot carry on a comfortable conversation while you're running. So if you can, when I actually do tempo runs with Mimi Fallon on a semi-regular basis, and we check each other out when we're doing it, saying, I can say a sentence and that's fine, but I can't carry on a conversation. If we're at that level, that's our proper tempo level. If we're going so fast that we can't actually talk, it's way too fast. If we're going at a level at which we can carry on an ongoing conversation, it's probably not fast enough. So if you're looking for a sort of a layperson's definition, I would say that would be it.
Or kind of like what your 5K pace would be for like 20 minutes. You can use that as a guide. But I would say you have to know what your goal is. If you're, like, for instance, if you get ready for cross country, you've got to do some hill work. You've got to do, because you're going to be running hills. So if you're going to be running hills, you need to incorporate that in your workout. So I'd probably back off a little bit on the track and add the hill component for getting ready for cross country.
The one exception I would say to that is that running around where we run in the greater Boston area, you usually have some hills on your daily runs. So you probably are getting some of that just on a regular basis anyway.
But I think you need to do some hill repeats getting ready for cross country.
It doesn't hurt. Yeah. If you are doing, say, track in the summertime, whether it was the Battle Road meets, Adrian Martinez, you were focusing on that, and then you were switching to cross country later in the fall. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely do that. Yeah.
So I'll just mention that when I moved to Needham, this runner that I used to know decades ago recognized me. And short story is I have been doing, for the first time ever, for the last year and a half, every Tuesday morning, almost every Tuesday morning, Tower Tuesday, where we do this hill repeat thing. And I think that for me, that's why I could run up Wachusett, but also why I did set that record at the Ramble, because knowing that those hills weren't as big as they used to be, or that pub race up in Drake or wherever it was when we had that long hill and it was passing people. So I kind of agree with Alda that, I mean, if you're going to run 4 or 5 days a week, and I don't, the benefit for me anyway has been incredible.
And to go back to Margaret's question, one of the elements that is often overlooked in terms of for those of you that may or may not be familiar with the seminal New Zealand coach, Arthur Lydiard, he is generally known as adding long, high mileage running for middle distance runners. What is often overlooked is that a key element in the training that his runners did was a preseason kind of series of bounding workouts, which were on an uphill level, and they would do, high knee bounding, which would really accentuate that dorsiflexion, that power drive off the ankle. So, yes, there is that element as well. And again, it all depends on the specific thing that you're training for. If it's shorter and faster, you want intense power. If it's cross country, you may not need that intense power, but you want the endurance power of it. So there's
and doing hills also helps you with form. You were talking, Margaret was talking about form.
Yes.
You have to lean forward. You're going up a hill. You have to get up on your forefoot because you're going up a hill, and there's less stress on the soft tissues. Part of the reason I got over an Achilles injury was I started running on softer surfaces and hills, going up the hills and then coming down slow, but doing that. I think it's very helpful you don't have to do them every week, but I think it's important to have part of doing hill work in your training, particularly if you're getting ready for like cross country. But like you said, for the Ramble, I did a lot of hills before running some of the Rambles to get ready.
And pumping your arms. I think that's the other thing that has really made a difference, is just pumping your arms, because that backward motion of your arm makes you go forward.
And hill work will do that. You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it helps with a lot with form.
In a short sentence, no matter what you're training for or where your training level is, hills are great. Hills, what you're doing. When I lived in Atlanta and I was a graduate student at Emory and was coaching the women's cross country team there, we would always have people come back from Florida whose hill over the summer had been a highway overpass. And Atlanta is actually on the tail end of the Appalachian Mountain Trade. So there's very hilly. So yes, they learned real fast the value and the difficulty of hills. I
was surprised how hilly.
Anything is difficult is good. And hills, let's embrace the fact that we live in a place where we have a lot of hills around us.
The other thing to remember as you're doing this is a lot of research has to still be done about aging runners. Okay,
Yes.
so you're talking
Yes.
about different decades of your life. But the other thing is that a lot of people change, and Meb Keflezighi and Scott Douglas wrote a book on this, but a lot of people change from that 7-day cycle to a 10-day cycle.
Yes.
And that is what led to Meb Keflezighi's longevity. So instead of doing speed work every Tuesday, it would be speed work every 10-day cycle. And then you could get in your hills and your fartlek because you've extended the week 10 days. That doesn't work for Liberty because we have
right.
every week. But it's something to consider if you're starting to feel beat up or injured or anything else.
That is absolutely true, Mary Kate. Thank you for adding that. That's really, really, really valuable. Yeah.
I really like that idea. 10-day cycle. That's great. So Kelly has a question, and it could be our last question. We wanted it to be about an hour, and we're just about reaching 8 o'clock, but I really like Kelly's question. So Kelly, go ahead. Or do you want me to read it? All right. She says, do you always warm up before a run? And if so, what do you do? Really great question. Probably
guess-
as many answers as there are on this.
That's right. I'll kick that off, since this is supposed to be Ask the Coach, so I'll kick that off. I used to start runs as fast as I felt. I no longer do that. I think Mary Cass has a really good pattern of she starts her warm-ups really, really slowly. You'd be amazed for as fast as a runner as she is, how slowly she starts her warm-ups. So, you know, on my daily runs, I go out the door and I live in a place where there's a steep hill one way. I go another way, it's kind of flat, but there's going to be a hill soon. I think you just take the first 3 to 5 or more minutes and just run the way your body feels. And that means, if anything else, slower than you know, I won't say artificially slow, but make that you're warming up slowly. Yeah. And don't, and let your run evolve. I've not put terms to that, but that's the way that my own runs. And again, I'm 69 years old. I sometimes start out on a run. I think I feel really slow and lethargic and not great today. And then I get about 20 minutes into my run and things are starting to kick up a little bit. And I'm not trying to push it, but suddenly the body is saying, okay, we're a runner. We know how to do this. And we're getting back in sync and in gear again. So this is not a very scientific answer to that question, but it is, you know, warm up as slow as you need to warm up. Don't warm up faster than you think you should. You know, take all the time you need.
There's also warming up before a race, warming up before
It's
track.
different. Yeah.
And part of that is that how you do your warm up. I mean, I usually go out, like I do 10 minutes of a slow run, but then you want to go in and do something that's more of an active as opposed to a passive, if you're going to get ready for track. So you want to do skipping and you want to do something of that nature to get your heart rate up, but without like going out hard. So there's also that involved. I think you have to warm up and get your heart rate up a little bit before a race. Not passive stretching, for instance. I mean, you wouldn't like want to do a roll, or, you know, some of the foam rolling, but you really want to do something that's more of an active. If you've seen some of the track people, they're skipping, they're hopping, they're doing sort of that active reflexive. You want to get the neuromuscular system going before a race. So I do a lot of that kind of stuff to begin with before a race. Karaoke, the sideways movement that you have, is all. I think it's helpful in getting ready before either road racing or track.
Yeah, Alma makes a good point, and I think that before, the difference between prepping for a race and prepping for a daily run are like different. And I will just make this one mention that when we, like last night, when we start before a Liberty workout, it's almost threading a needle a little bit because a lot of people are well warmed up. A lot of people are not terribly well warmed up. Sometimes we get the situation where people are standing around a while. If we started a workout where everybody was properly warmed up, we probably wouldn't start until about 6:30, 6:10 or 6:15. Sometimes I will skip the drills that ideally we might do just because I want to make sure that people have got that lap or lap and a half run in, and usually a couple of strides in. If you do nothing else before a track workout, you want to make sure that you've got some steady running in and a couple of strides in. And ideally, yes, you can get in some of those drills that you do that the CSU folks do religiously, but they're all together at the same time, ready to go, which we tend to be more, you know, some people are here and some people are there, some people are coming at the last minute. So I'm certainly open to correction on that, but that is the way I've tried to thread that in particular needle on Tuesday workouts anyway. Everybody shut up.
Oh, no, sorry. It took me a while to like find
I've
that.
silenced everyone.
No,
No,
just
thank you. That's helpful.
don't warm up for a marathon though. Just walk up to the starting line.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we lost our moderator.
I think so. I think.
Oh, that's why. Okay.
Yeah.
And bailed out.
Well, thank you very much, John. I have to jump too, but I appreciate the time.
Oh, it was great fun. Thank you all. It's great to see you and great to be with you. And, you know, some folks that I see on a regular basis and some folks that I almost never see these days. So it's wonderful to be around. Yeah.
Yeah. All
Thanks,
right.
Coach.
Thank you.
Bye,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh my God.